Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Governance Scrutiny Group meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. And can I also remind councillors to please switch off your microphones when you're not speaking. So welcome also to our guests this evening from DBO and Mazars, so Max Armstrong and Jennifer Norman. And also thanks for our officers for giving up their time in the evenings to come and talk to us. Can I just also point out that there's a slight amendment to the order of the items on the agenda this evening. The amendments to the Constitution is going to be moved to be discussed at item 9 of the agenda after the capital investment strategy. And a copy of the amended agenda front sheet has been provided. So if we can move to the first item on the agenda, can we have apologies for absence, please?
We have apologies from Councillor Thomas, and Councillor Billing is substituting.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Billing, and welcome. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the meeting of the 28th of November 2024. There were no matters arising from those minutes. Is everyone content with those minutes? Does anyone have anything to raise? So that's a affirmation. So I'll sign those. I can sign them at the end. Yeah. Item number 4 then, the internal audit progress report, and that's Max Armstrong to present.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got the next 2 items on the agenda, but I'll start with the progress report. I'll give a quick summary as to the contents of the progress report and then stop at the end for any questions at all. So this report summarises our progress in the last quarter around delivering the 24-25 internal audit plan. But what I wanted to start with actually is at the bottom of page 9 of your packs, which is an update in the professional standards that we as internal audit work to. So there's been an update in the global internal audit standards in January 2024, and over the subsequent 12 months there was changes to the UK audit standards, the public sector audit standards, and then for local government, SIPFA have got an additional set of standards that we have to adhere to, and that work has all been around ensuring they ultimately comply with the global internal audit standards. So what I wanted to start by giving some level of assurance to the committee is that BDO as a firm, as many other firms will be part of, we're participating in the consultation process. We're confident that our current and existing processes comply with the new standards. I think we're already sort of working above and beyond the existing standards with minimal changes. So essentially our compliance to the new standards is included within our charter in the annual plan. So that's in the next paper, and I'll talk a little bit about it then. But that first bit was just to sort of make you aware of those changes in the general internal audit landscape that we work to. Moving on to page 21, which is the summary table of our work for the year. So we've completed 7 of the 9 reviews currently in the year, with 2 that are due to come to yourselves in June 2025 with our annual opinion as well. So we're on track for that date. All field work for all reviews have been completed, and we're actually at the draft reporting stage for the final 2 reviews. So we're well in advance of that June committee deadline date. And then the 2 audits that I'll be presenting or giving a quick summary of before I open up to any questions for this committee are the Carbon Management Action Plan and the Housing Benefits. And I'll start with the Carbon Management Action Plan, where we provided substantial assurance over the control design and moderate over the control effectiveness. There were 2 medium findings in this review. One being around the action plan and the actions themselves, and I guess how smart they were to support, I guess, clear, focused action around delivering that plan. I should have said at the start, actually, this review was around the governance side, monitoring and the management of the plan, rather than necessarily the council's commitments it's made to actually completing and being carbon neutral. Positive to see in the first finding the recommendations were all accepted, and work is due to, or is underway and due to be completed by the 30th of April, around sort of making those actions smart. On to the second finding, and essentially it was around the monitoring of those actions and more importantly the retention of minutes or notes for those governance groups that oversee the delivery of those actions, and the absence of those. So actually what's being proposed by management is slightly different to what the recommendation is, but I think it meets the overall principle of the recommendation around keeping an action log and ensuring that is monitored, to keep that focus around the carbon management action plan. And then the second audit completed in this period was the housing benefits review, where substantial assurance was provided over both the design and the effectiveness with only 2 low findings. So low findings are typically ones we sort of class as housekeeping, essentially. The risk to the council is low, but the control could be strengthened slightly. And the 2 low findings, one was around the documentation of certain searchlight checks, and actually noting the management response. There's some comments around where they come from. The claimant comes from universal credit initially onto housing benefit. There's some sort of assurance obtained around the DWP checks and reliance on those, but also the retention of the accuracy control sheet, which is the internal document that records that those checks have been conducted. And then secondly, the review and approval process for discretionary housing payments. And again, positive to see that the management response has accepted the recommendation, and actually so this review was completed back in December. So the target date was early January for the completion of having a review process in place for that. In the rest of the report, there's bits around our sector update and KPIs. So I won't go through them in detail, but I will pause there for any comments or questions.
Has anyone got any comments or questions? Councillor Home.
This is on page 21 about cyber security. So is there any finding on that?
So the cyber security review was presented to the last committee. It was in a closed session, so I'll be careful about what I say here because obviously it's quite a sensitive topic. But it was presented to the last committee. The full report was in those committee papers, so it's probably worth sort of referring back to those. But yeah, I'll be careful what I say in the sitting there.
Any Councillor Polenta.
Just a couple of clarification questions on page 23. So it says this shows that the gas consumption from externally managed leisure centres is the highest emission area. So when you talk about the contributors, you mentioned that the externally managed leisure centres are the biggest contributors of gas emission. Do you juxtapose that? Sorry, did you find the area? So it's like areas of strength where you talk about the tracker. This tracker is page 23. I don't know if it's correct page. I'm looking. This tracker.
If I could open mine, I'll tell you.
This tracker also includes a dashboard which shows. So it's the point 2.
Max, I think this is probably, so it's talking about the fact that obviously leisure centre is a big contributor, but I think the main reason for that is because we heat swimming pools.
Sorry,
Yeah.
So did you find this way? Because you talk from externally managed leisure centers, do you juxtapose data with internally managed and you found the difference, or you reckon all overall leisure centers are contributors? And the second question is straight after. That's just for me to get clarity. I do not understand the paragraph after. You say we did not provide assurance on whether the data is correct or the council is likely to hit its carbon neutral target. So you mean you haven't calibrated the functional model, so the data is not experiential, the data haven't been calibrated of their accuracy? Yeah, just these 2 points. Oh, sorry.
So yes, I think the second bit was around the data validation essentially. So this review scope was not around necessarily validating the data. That would be quite a large piece of work. I think looking at all the data that's collected So the focus was on the governance, management and monitoring of what I guess ultimately the council are producing data-wise and how that's then managed through the governance structures. So where it's providing that areas of strength is actually there was a clear trail to see there are data management dashboards that are collated using internal data that's collected from the leisure centres. We didn't then go in and sort of check that data to say, can we see that data is fully accurate? Because that would be quite a large piece of assurance work. But yeah, provide assurance over that governance generally. And then on the part around the leisure centres, so I suppose ultimately the assurance there is comes back to the actual carbon management action plan itself and how it's ultimately laid out and split. And that is by the fact there are different sort of sections for leisure, property assets, contract management, etc. And there's clear actions for each service area. And that's kind of what we'd expect to see ultimately from a clear plan to help that sort of effective governance, rather than having it all sort of almost convoluted into one large action plan. It's sort of well structured, well split to help that effective governance. Does that answer the question? Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wonder if the externally managed had any signification, but it was just a descriptor. So you mentioned as a positive that the council records the emission even from subcontract. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, Councillor Birch. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just with regards to the leisure centres, could I request that we have some information on the CO2 emissions from the leisure centres, in particular Bingham, which is the newest one? My understanding is the swimming pools are gas heated. There's no solar input into them, just by the nature of how there's obviously a large volume of water to heat, and the solar panels don't touch the sides. Is there any data councillors could have on that just to see? I don't know if there's anything available. Is there anything that could perhaps be brought back or emailed to us?
I was going to say, I can certainly feed that back and ask. I know that when the Bingham Leisure Centre was designed, it was designed with carbon emissions in mind. But in terms of specifically the CO2 emissions, I can go back and ask if we've got that data.
I think I can add to that as well. Yeah, we actually spent quite a lot of time on Bingham because it was a brand new leisure centre to reduce the carbon emissions and make it as efficient as we possibly could at the time. Obviously, our other leisure centres are less efficient, and some of the work that we're doing at the moment on upgrading Cotgrave and Keyworth is actually about reducing the carbon footprint on them as well. So, but any other questions from anyone? Okay, so so we're just being asked there to recommend that we've considered the Q3 progress report prepared by the council's internal auditor. Are we all happy that that's fine? And that's nods all round. So thanks, Max, and on to your next bit.
Thank you, Chair. So my second paper I'll be presenting today is our internal audit plan for 2025-26. And we're asking the committee to review the plan and ultimately approve it for us to then sort of start with the actual delivery of the plan over the next financial year. And this also includes our strategic plan for the next 3 years as well. If I could just sort of start by talking a little bit about how we develop this internal audit plan. So our starting point is always to take the strategic plan from last year, what was ultimately sort of seen as the next 3 years of internal audit coverage, but not take that as an isolated point in time. So ultimately things have changed in the last 12 months. So that the second point will always be the council's risk register. What are those highest risks, and ensuring that those areas are covered in our 3-year cycle. The plan in draft also goes to the executive management team for its review, comments and input. And I also met with all executive directors individually to get their views on what those key risks are. There are other factors that come into it. So areas such as we want to get sort of reasonable coverage of the whole council. We don't want to be focused on certain service areas only. And also where we've done reviews in prior years and provided substantial assurance, ultimately there's only a sort of an element of value to reviewing that again in such a short period. So to ensure there's enough time between individual audits. So you'll see the actual plan for 25-26 itself starts on page 50. Oh, sorry, not page 51, page 58 of your packs. And that gives a summary as to the 9 audits that are in the plan for 25-26. So 8 full audit reviews plus the fraud report, which we do every year for the council. I won't go through every review individually, so I'll take those as read in the packs. But what we try to do within this plan is provide that core assurance over those key processes, so financial areas, core services like council tax, asset management and investment, but also cover other areas as well around the future focused assurance to look at business planning and emergency preparedness for areas like that. And there's always a few contingency days in there as well to provide additional support throughout the year where risks change and things emerge. So again, I'll pause there and ask for any questions, but ultimately we are looking for the committee to hopefully be happy to approve this plan today.
Okay, does anyone have any questions on the forward plan and what's put in there for planning? No? We're all happy to approve that. I think one thing I probably would comment that I noticed, obviously there's a number of increased risks in the forward plan that we need to keep our eye on in the future, and obviously we will do. Okay, so thanks a lot, Max. Obviously, what we haven't got tonight is actually an external audit report, but I would like to say, I should have said this earlier possibly, that we have actually had the accounts signed off now, and that's very good. And so thank you very much for the team here and the team from our external auditors for getting those accounts signed off. So next on the agenda is the risk management progress report, and that's over to Sarah for that.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is just going to cover it's the second report of this financial year, and it just summarises the council's risk register and any risks that have been increased or removed since the last time we met. So the risk management group met in January 25, and they reviewed the risk register and made recommendations for changes, and this is the information that you're seeing now. Bit of other supporting information as well in paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3 was an audit was done in July 22, and also during 23-24 Zurich came in and did a desktop exercise of our risk descriptions, and in accordance with best practice there were some recommendations made to make those a little bit clearer. So you'll have seen that during 24-25 those risk descriptions did change slightly just to make them a little bit more robust. So there are currently 38 corporate risks, and 3 new risks have been added, and 1 new operational risk has been added. So those are at paragraph 4.6. 3 of those, so the corporate risks, are in relation to local government reorganisation. So we have identified that as a result of that, there may be some difficulty in recruiting and retaining staff. Also, that there could be a break in service delivery when we do transition onto a new authority, and also risks to the medium-term financial strategy, given that it may not make it to its 5 years that currently is approved. The 4th new risk is an operational risk, and this relates to the housing benefits subsidy pressure, and this has been reported before to Cabinet as part of budget monitoring. But it's to do with the registered providers of charities or community interest companies and our loss of housing benefits subsidy. And this risk has been added in purely because it's possible that others could arise within the borough. It's a low risk at the moment, but it is in there as a new risk. The risk that's increased is the 5-year housing supply due to increases in our housing targets. And there have been no risks reduced or removed. And I think that's over to questions.
Sorry.
Yeah, just on the Rushcliffe Oaks crematorium, it's kind of risen every now and again. Just wondering about the likelihood of looking at the impact and likelihood matrix. The likelihood is at level 2. Is that because there's going to be some reviews being done on the workings of the crematorium, awaiting those results?
Can you just confirm which page you're on with that risk? Sorry, I'm not.
It was on CRR Space PDG3.
Oh, 3. Okay, so yeah, so I think at the moment the impact is medium because if it didn't meet its business case targets, then obviously the income would be reduced to the council. In terms of likelihood, it's still really in its infancy, so we're still building a customer base, which is improving sort of month on month. But obviously that's just time will tell with that model. So we do regular comparisons to the original business case, and projections are updated on a regular basis. But should that risk change, then obviously those risk scores would change as well.
I'd just like to know whether we can be given any figures that compares where we are now with what the targets are.
You mean figures to compare?
Yeah, just in terms of the projected figures, number of funerals that would take place.
We do have that information as reported. I'm not sure what group it goes to, but we have reported on the crematorium at another group.
Another scrutiny group.
Another scrutiny group, and part of the budget monitoring quarterly reporting, we do include the crematorium in there also.
So we could get
To cabinet, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's possibly worth noting that I think, as Sarah says, that it's making sure that we're monitoring against the business plan. And I think when the crematorium opened, it was over optimistic in the business plan to start with, shall we say? No, it was actually optimistic. It thought we'd actually be. It was almost like it would be a greater capacity straight from the outset, basically. And clearly it's a brand new facility, and people have got to get used to it. And I think there was a lack of recognition of the fact that it would actually gradually build its business. But I think what I've heard since is that it's now getting up to the sorts of numbers that we were expecting. So that helps. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Polenta.
Just one question on the FCS 17 new risk on the loss of housing benefit subsidy. Could you just please, I haven't read the cabinet meeting, but has this provider has failed to accept accommodation status? Is it any criteria they fail? And what is like, is it related as well to temporary accommodation? Is it only accommodation? Could you just give some information?
So the accommodation itself is a charity or registered provider, and they provide supported housing care. So this is people that need perhaps help with drug rehabilitation or other elements of care, and they provide that care alongside the accommodation itself. And due to their status, we aren't able to claim back full housing benefit subsidy for those residents. So that's where the cost impacts on us.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, so we're asked here to make the recommendation. It's recommended that our group review the contents of the report and that we consider and make recommendations on risks that in particular are new risks or have red alert status, or any risks that are not identified. I think the report does clarify does clarify the new risks, and so if we're all happy to just really endorse the fact that we note the report and endorse the risks that have been highlighted. Yeah, okay, if everyone's happy with that. Okay, next item is the capital and investment strategy update Q3. So that's over to Marie Heald, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the third quarter report for 24-25. The report starts with a look at the economic forecast. The UK economy is experiencing low growth, although gross domestic product unexpectedly increased 0.4% in December. Planned government spending will stimulate the economy, with predicted growth anticipated to reach 1.5% later in the year. The Bank of England cut interest rates to 4.5%, the lowest rate since June 23. Rates are expected to be cut again in May by 0.25%, with smaller cuts anticipated in August and November, reducing the bank rate to 3.75%, where it is expected to plateau. Inflation unexpectedly rose to 3% in January, up from 2.5% in December, and is expected to fall to 2.75% this summer. Unemployment rose slightly from 4% in October to 4.3% in November, and is expected to remain relatively stable, hovering at 4.1%. Paragraph 4.5 looks at investment income. The council had budgeted to receive just over £1 million in interest receipts during 24-25, and is expected to exceed this figure, with current projections just over £2 million. Interest receipts are higher than anticipated due to larger investment balances and interest rates remaining higher for longer. Overall, the council achieved an average interest rate of 4.69%, slightly lower than Q2, which averaged 4.88%. Appendix A shows the range of investments held at the end of December. The council holds a diversified portfolio to protect itself from interest rate risk. The council holds just over 99 million in investments, 50 million held in relation to Section 106 and SIL agreements. 43.57 million is held in short-term fixed rate investments, which vary in duration. The council continues to consider green investments that are compliant with the council's strategy. We have a Better World Cautious Fund with CCLA and an ESG liquidity account with HSBC. Paragraph 4.9 highlights a fluctuation in the fair value of the diversified funds. Appendix B shows a drop in value since initial investment, just under 1 million less than purchase price. These funds are volatile and affected by political and economic instability. There is a statutory override in place until the end of March, so the impact of this loss doesn't impact on the revenue accounts. There is uncertainty what will happen after this date. The consultation has ended, and early indications are that MHCLG are minded not to actually are minded to end the statutory override. The risk going forward has been mitigated by appropriations to the Treasury Capital Depreciation Reserve. Capital. The council is currently projecting an underspend of around 4.4 million due to reprofiling of some schemes such as Cotgrave and Keyworth Leisure Centre enhancements, together with savings on other schemes such as Rushcliffe Oaks Crematorium. Prudential indicators can be seen in Appendix C. The expected investment position at the end of the financial year is 78 million, compared with the budgeted figure of 56 million. The CFR, which includes internal borrowing, is anticipated to drop to 7.7 million. The balance is reducing as repayment in the form of MRP and use of capital receipts are applied. The liability benchmark shows that there is no need to borrow over the medium term, with a projected credit balance of 64 million, showing an excess of funds in the form of reserves and working capital over borrowing. The ratio of financing cost to net revenue streams is a key indicator of affordability. The breakdown of this calculation can be seen in Table 3. The projected actual at Q3 is -5%. The minus indicating that interest receipts exceed financing costs. As previously mentioned, interest receipts are considerably higher than originally estimated. The ratio income from commercial and service investment as a percentage of net revenue streams is broken down in Table 4 and is projected to be 11.1%, marginally lower than budgeted. Commercial investments are discussed in paragraph 20 onwards. Currently, investment income from commercial activity accounts for 13% of the council's total income. The projection at the end of the year is slightly lower than this due to higher revenue streams for the council as a whole. To conclude, Interest rates have remained higher than expected, having a positive effect on returns, but slower economic growth in the UK and global events such as the US presidency impact negatively on the capital value of some of the council's investments. This, coupled with the fact that the UK is experiencing its own inflationary pressures, means the Bank of England will be reluctant to drop interest rates significantly, which is good for investors, but it makes borrowing more expensive, leading to a decrease in consumer demand, consumer spending, and slow economic growth. This affects the value of the diversified funds, so officers will continue to monitor the environment and report any significant issues to the Governance Scrutiny Group.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Any questions from anyone on that? There's quite a lot of financial data there, and Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding the capital expenditure that hasn't been spent in the year that's rolled into the next year, and how the council accounts for inflation in materials and inflation in labour, and obviously inflation in general. Is that calculated? I guess I have two questions. First of all, is it calculated? I'm sure it is. And secondly, how is it calculated? Is it using CPI or is it using labour and material costs, inflation?
In terms of calculating the cost of the specific schemes, yes, they will be used to calculate no recognised indices. But in terms of the slipped projects, most of the time they're only sort of like a few months behind schedule. So therefore, the impact of inflation wouldn't ordinarily impact on them unless there was a significant short-term increase. If there was a project that was, say, delayed for a number of years, then that would be reassessed. And we do put capital appraisals in to the annual budget report that you'll see going to council in March. So those appraisals would be revisited on an annual basis, and if the costs change, that would be factored in.
I think it's possibly worth adding, so for example, say on Bigham Leisure Centre, when that was built, quite a lot of the prices were fixed ahead of time in terms of materials, because effectively we committed to buying them. I think that's true to say, isn't it? So yeah, that's one of the ways of mitigating against inflation. I don't think we realised at the time how much inflation was going to be, but a good job we did. Okay, no further questions. So the recommendation is that the group considers the capital investment strategy update position and that we're happy with it. So yeah. And then next item on the agenda is capital investment strategy for 2025, 2026. And back to Maria again.
Thank you, Chair. This report details the capital and investment strategy for the next 5 years. In Appendix A, the strategy is broken down into 4 parts: the capital strategy and prudential indicators, the MRP statement, the TM strategy, and lastly, commercial investments. Paragraph 8 shows projected capital spend and how it is funded. There is no underlying need to borrow over the medium term. The impact on the CFR and investment balances is shown in Table 2. The CFR is reducing as repayments in the form of MRP and capital receipts are applied. Investment balances taper off because reserves are being used to fund capital and revenue, and working capital is reducing as Section 106 monies paid to the council decline and monies from developers are released. MRP policy is detailed in paragraphs 16 and 17. This details the council's methodology for charging the cost of borrowing to the revenue account. Paragraph 18 details the Treasury strategy. Key points are the forecast for the UK economy, which we've just touched on in the previous report. Table 4 shows anticipated interest receipts and assumed interest rates. A downward trend can be seen with both investment balances and interest rates falling over time. Tables 5 and 6 show the authorised limit, the limit beyond which borrowing is prohibited, and the operational boundary which is not a limit but should never exceed the authorised limit. And whilst the council is not expected to externally borrow over the medium term, the operational boundary provides a cushion and gives flexibility should circumstances change significantly. Paragraph 33 shows the liability benchmark. The credit balances again illustrating the council's lack of need to borrow. Table 9 looks at the proportion of financing costs to net revenue streams. MRP payments in relation to Rushcliffe Arena finishing 26-27, resulting in the figures being in credit, indicating net interest earned rather than an interest cost. Net revenue streams fluctuate over the period. There is no new homes bonus after 25-26, and later years reflect both a downward trend in interest receipts, whilst income from council tax and localised business rates increase. Table 10 looks at the indicator net income from commercial and service investments expressed as a percentage of net revenue streams. The increase in net income reflects rent increases and the full year effect of Rushcliffe Oaks Crematorium and Bingham Arena offices. Paragraph 39 details the investment strategy. TM limits are set for the purposes of minimising risks. They're set using third-party credit ratings and counterparties which are approved by the Council's Treasury advisors. Table 12 shows types of counterparties and their limits as internally approved to optimise our investment opportunities whilst mitigating risk. Paragraph 68 to 81 covers the commercial investment policy. This section looks at existing investments, since PWLB borrowing isn't permitted if there are any plans for commercial investment in the capital programme, so no further commercial activities envisaged. A key indicator is the Council's reliance upon commercial income. Table 16 at paragraph 75 shows net income from commercial investments account for approximately 11% of total income. Paragraph 76 covers risk exposure indicators, and the charts depict how investments are diversified across the sectors to minimise risk. Paragraph 82 covers the importance of both member and officer training. Commercial investments held at 31st of March 24 are shown in Appendix 3, and the Council's TM policy statement is shown in Appendix B. To conclude, the financial environment is facing uncertainty, and this brings with it risks. These are covered in the body of the strategy. By setting and following prudential indicators and managing risk through setting investment limits and diversifying investments, the Council has set a robust capital and investment strategy. Our Treasury advisors, Arlene Close, have endorsed the Council's proportionate approach to both our Treasury and commercial property investments. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. So can we have some questions? Obviously, it's a very lengthy report, very comprehensive, so thank you for, I'm sure there's a lot of work went into that. Councillor Birch.
Thank you. Yeah, well done. My question is about the risk with the investment. So obviously we've got a new president in coming to the USA. Is there anything this council has received any advice or any forecasts for the worst case scenario geopolitical events? Because I'm just conscious, obviously, for example, if something happens with Russia, if something happens in the Middle East, there'll be a direct impact on worldwide energy supply, and that would presumably impact certain investments that will be disproportionately affected by ties to energy. I know we don't have carbon. We're not affiliated with lots of carbon producing fund things, but is there anything specific to that? Because that's obviously a new risk, I think, that's come up. And, you know, I suppose we have to plan for the worst case, don't we?
Currently, obviously, our financial advisors are quite concerned about the inflationary impact of such policies. And I think that's the key thing. We're just seeing inflation creep up currently. Any inflation is going to have to be affected by interest rate changes as part of their monetary policy. So I think it's just going to be swings and roundabouts. And whilst, inflation will mean higher interest rates, better for us as an authority, we have got this problem with the diversified funds that do suffer. So we've got that £15 million pot of investments that, are not holding their value.
Thank you. My question was specifically about, have we had any specific advice from any advisory bodies with regards to those risks, which I think are real risks and could impact the council?
Yeah, as you say, the risks, and we saw it with the other Ukraine and other global events that we've had. It does have an impact on interest rates, like Marie said. It puts inflation up, so interest rates are counterbalanced to affect that. But in terms of specific advice, there's not a lot they can do specifically for an event. What they'll do is look at the economic environment and how it's changing in reaction to that, and then give us specific advice and update our interest rates. They will give us advice on where we should and shouldn't invest. I think there was some advice around the time of Russia not to invest in certain things, but we haven't had anything specifically at the moment to say don't invest with certain institutions. It will just be part of our counterparties list where they will say somebody's scoring is below what we would accept as part of the policy, and then we wouldn't invest with them, or we would divest if they dropped below that level. So it's just constant monitoring, I suppose, is the answer to that.
So just to be clear, they've got like a big picture, big model, and everything is feeding into that, and then they just give their advice based on.
Yes, so they sort of see like the wider picture. They take advice from their experts, and there's lots of other organisations that sort of talk to each other around those projections.
I think it's probably fair to say that until something concrete happens, you can plan for as many risks as you want, but until actually something happens, it's very difficult to predict, which actually, of course, we saw with Ukraine, where there were threats, were they going to do anything? So it's a bit, predicting that's a little bit like knitting fog at the moment, I think. Possibly. Anyway, any further questions on that? So on the strategy, we are actually recommending this, as the scrutiny group have looked at this and recommend it for approval by full council. And that's partly, there's 5 parts to this. The first part is that the capital strategy and capital prudential indicators and limits for 2025-26 to 2029-30 are contained within paragraphs 4 to 15, if we're happy with those. B, the minimum revenue provision statement contained within Appendix A, so that's paragraphs 16 and 17, which sets out the council's policy on MRP. I think that's quite clear if everyone's happy with that. And C, treasury management strategy for those same years, 25-26 to 29-30, and the treasury indicators contained within Appendix A, so that's paragraphs 18 to 67. And D, the Treasury Management Policy Statement for 2025-26, which is Appendix B. And E, the Commercial Investment Indicators and Limits for 2025-26 to 29-30, contained within Appendix A, paragraphs 68 to 81. So I think the fact that we've not raised questions other than the sort of uncertainty about a few future world events, I think certainly I didn't find anything in the report that I wanted to sort of pull out. So are we happy that we take that recommendation and that goes to full council? Yep. Okay, lovely. Thank you. So that brings us then to item 9. Thank you, Marie, and thank you for all the work you did on that. It's obviously an awful lot there for us to digest. Amendments to the Constitution. So that's going to be presented by Sarah, our monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The report and appendix, which deals with proposed amendments to the Constitution following an annual review of the Constitution, can be found at pages 7 to 11 of your agenda. The Council has a statutory duty to keep its Constitution under review to ensure it's relevant, up to date and fit for purpose. As a minimum, we must undertake a review of the Constitution on an annual basis, which this report and any subsequent report to Council demonstrates compliance with. The proposed amendments for your consideration are set out in the appendix and have been suggested following feedback received from councillors, officers and members of the public. This is also my first review of the Constitution since joining the Council, and I've been able to bring my experience from elsewhere, as well as looking at best practice across neighbouring authorities in Nottinghamshire. The first two amendments that are proposed as set out in Appendix 1 relate to matters of clarification. The first is in respect of the situations under which the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman would consider complaints against the Council received from members of the public. So they will only do that where the Council's own complaints procedure has been exhausted first of all, and that currently wasn't set out in there. And the second relates to clarification that the scheme of delegation to officers in respect of planning matters extends to the local development order. The section of the Constitution where that is currently cited, it is separate to the scheme of delegation, so I felt that that was necessary in order to add that clarity. The remaining proposals relate to the rules that govern council meetings and are intended to assist with the efficient running of the meetings. I've also tried to address a potential accessibility issue in the current rules. Further to publication of this report, councillors will note that we have received a report from the Local Government Association following a review they have undertaken of the council's last meeting held in December 24. Councillors should note that the review concluded that this would be a great opportunity for the council to consider its current arrangements in terms of how council meetings are run and whether they serve the council and the residents of Rushcliffe well. The recommendation is to consider these proposals and then to recommend their adoption to full council. If that recommendation is approved, then a report will go to full council at March's meeting where all councillors will be able to debate and consider the proposals that have been put forward. I'd be happy to take any questions, Chair.
Can I start off, actually, Sarah, just saying you made reference to the letter. Obviously, that's only just come out. This has been published well over a week ago. And so really what we're considering here is what's published in front of us and not the letter, isn't it?
Yes, so the recommendation before you, Chair, is to consider the proposals that have been put forward. These are proposals, these are only proposals at this stage. So of course, as part of your deliberations, you may suggest something different, for example, or that something additional should be included to go to full council. As I say, the report concluded that now would be a time to review our arrangements, and I think my advice would be that the review that I've undertaken, I feel that sufficiently addresses that. But of course, it's something for you to consider as a committee.
Yeah, but the letter itself is it may come up with further work, if you like, as a result of it. Whereas what we've got in front of us is actually, if you like, what we're considering. That's what I'm getting to. So in a way, the fact that we all got a letter 2 days ago is really, we should be focusing on this and not the letter.
Yes, I mean, this report is about the annual review of the Constitution and amendments that are being suggested.
And if action comes as a result of that letter, that's something that would be debated at a further meeting of the Scrutiny Group, I'm suggesting. Yeah.
Yes, we need to consider how that's going to be taken forward, and certainly that's one option.
Okay. Right. I'm going to Councillor Birch and then Councillor Calvert. Can I actually suggest that we go through? I don't know if you've got a whole list of questions.
I do.
Is it better to go? What I'd like to do is actually go through each part. So on citizens' rights, can we all agree that, or do you want to?
Well, I've got a bit of a wider.
Okay. Let's see how we get on, and we'll see if that's the best approach.
Okay, thank you. And if you just indulge me just for a minute, because I need to say a couple of things at the start to actually set up what I'm going to say afterwards. And I don't want to bore everyone to death. I'll be as quick as I can, but I do think this is important. So really, I want to speak to this from the position of an opposition councillor and an opposition group and an opposition political party. And I think the reason why this is important is I think we need tools as opposition councillors to be able to scrutinise power. And I've got a few concerns about some of the things that have been raised. I know they've been raised in good faith, and the aim is to improve the efficiency of meetings. But I just want to outline it from my point of view as an opposition councillor, and I hope the ruling group can sort of empathise with what we're saying here. So just to set it all up, the environment we find ourselves in as smaller parties is the voting system we have disproportionately favours the ruling group or the majority group. So Conservatives got 44% of the votes, got 56% of the seats. So Labour got 27% of the votes and only 20% of the seats. Lib Dems got 13% of the votes and only 2% of the seats. So we are already from the outset we are it's sort of set up against us. There is a financial impact as well, which disadvantages us because, of course, the way it normally works with the political parties is they have councillors, and then they give a certain percentage of their allowances into the pot, which is then used for elections. So let's just take some rough sums. For example, 25 Conservative councillors.
Can I just say we're not talking here about Conservative
sorry,
group.
Yeah, it could be any party.
We're talking about but the point is we're talking about the Constitution, and not what different political groups do, how money is raised for those particular groups. I have no idea how Labour raise their money, and obviously I know what the Conservative group do, but I think that's not what we're talking about. We aren't here to talk about the constitutional things and not the sort of balance of how parties work. So I think, please keep all of your comments directly at the Constitution changes, please.
It is relevant to the Constitution because it speaks to that we need the tools and the powers because we are disadvantaged by the way the system is set up. That's what I'm getting at. So I take your point, Chair, and I'll move along. So basically, we have very few tools at our disposal. We're financially disadvantaged. We're disadvantaged by the electoral system. There are lots of advantages that the ruling party have, whoever that party is, in terms of the marketing. If you look at it through that lens, in terms of the amount of people who, photo ops and so on, and publicity. So the things that we're talking about in these changes here are, I think, vital for us because they are one of the few things we have at our disposal. So if we take recorded votes, for instance, and I appreciate there's lots of other councils do things in a different way, but in my view, recorded votes are absolutely vital. To take a couple of examples, I raised a recorded vote on Bingham's car parking in September 2023. The local politicians in Bingham had been saying for years that they'd tried to buy the land of the town council and they were trying to build this car park. It's not true, and I won't get into the politics of it, but the point was I made a recorded vote, and now that is on the record in the public domain forevermore. And then in this forthcoming election, it disarms the group from being able to spread that information or misinformation, as I see it.
Yeah, I think you're getting away from what the Constitution changes are, and you're talking about a single issue, and it's not preventing a recorded vote. It's just basically saying, and I have to say, I think when I first became a councillor, recorded votes were few and far between, and they've almost become, I want a recorded vote, and if it's only one person who has to ask for it, I think it's fair that actually it should be a consensus of more than one. And I recognise that there's only two of you in your particular party, but we also know that, I'm sure that you discuss things with other groups, and you would get a consensus. So it's not saying you can't have a recorded vote. It's just basically saying, let's think about it a bit more, and we want 5 people to support it. And I don't think that's, well, personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. And I hear what you're saying, but I think that's one of the reasons I was suggesting what we should do is actually go through this by each factor, because there's some I think we can agree on, and there's some that we may have a bit of a wider debate.
Well, if that's the consensus of everyone in the group, I'm happy to do that. That's easier for everyone. As I say, I was very nearly finished with my comments, but If that's what you want to do, you're the chair.
If you want to just finish your comments, that's fine. But what I'm just sort of trying to keep you focused on the changes and not, how you've, what you see as the unfairness of them.
It's not the unfairness, Chair. It's the fact that they're counter to democracy and transparency. That's my concern. And I'm trying to give you the point of view of an opposition councillor who is the odds stacked against us in every way. And we need these tools. And I'm trying to make that case. That's all I'm trying to do. So I'm happy to go through them one by one if that is what the meeting would like to do.
I think that's, is that the general consensus? Because I think basically if we don't go through them one by one, we won't get consensus on anything. And I'm clear. I'm sure there are things that we can get consensus on. And if we then need to vote on specific items, then we'll have to vote on specific items. But otherwise, we'll, unless we take each individual recommendation, because they all, they are all separate recommendations, and I know some of them relate to others in some ways, but ultimately they are separate recommendations. So I think I'm going to do it that way. And I hear what you've said. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I just wanted to react to the letter that was read out. I would have thought it would be best to leave that to the next meeting. It's been useful having it recognised that the letter has arrived, but it's not on the agenda.
Which is what I said. Yeah. Which is, that's why I brought it up, because I wanted to make it clear that obviously that letter's come out since this was on the agenda, and we're here to consider this and not the letter. That will come, whatever recommendations come from that, we will consider in the future. Okay. So if we can actually go back to Appendix 1 and look at citizens' rights, are we all happy that are we happy that the Constitution should be amended to at least include after following the council's complaints procedure? Because I think if we haven't gone through the procedure ourselves and satisfied a citizen's complaint, then absolutely they should be going to the Ombudsman. But I think we need to have at least had the opportunity to go through our due process. And I think can we all agree on that?
Well, we did. That's clarifying.
Yeah.
No, just going to agree. So just to be clear, I'm happy to go with that. It makes sense. Does our complaints procedure have a time limit within it? No, it's putting you on the spot here. But if it doesn't, my worry is it would just drag on for an indefinite amount of time, and then the person is left without an avenue.
So I suppose just some clarity first of all, in terms of this additional wording, it doesn't change the right of anybody to complain to the local government ombudsman. What this sets out is the fact that their procedure is that somebody should go through the council's complaint procedure first of all. So it's just adding that clarity. So a member of the public reading the council's constitution is aware of that fact. In terms of the complaints procedure here, if somebody raises a formal complaint, that's a stage 1 complaint, and we have a set time period in which to investigate and respond. Somebody can then take that to a stage 2 complaint where it's considered by somebody of a more senior level. And again, there's a set time period in relation to that. If there is a delay in somebody issuing a complaint in the first stance, that might be considered in terms of whether we accept it and how we deal with it. But yes, there is a set procedure with timescales, and that's published on the council's website.
Just again for clarity, because it says after following the council's complaint procedure, does the council's complaint procedure have to have ended before they can move on? You say after following it, I followed it, I've done it, and now we're going to do something.
Yes, that is correct. So the complaints procedure would need to be followed fully in order for the local government ombudsman to accept a complaint within their jurisdiction and for them to consider.
apart from the one it actually sits in, yes. My only question really about the LDO is, you said quite rightly, Chair, that there's a mechanism where neighbouring ward members can raise questions or objections.
So that's outlined in the paragraph above the
Yeah,
amendment,
yeah.
basically.
So, yeah, I think given that I'm very pleased to see including as required under the LDO. So it's determined as required whether or not they comply with the terms of the LDO. If that wasn't in there, I'd have objected. But
I think it was quite. Summary.
Yes, I think so. So, in terms of this one, it really is just to add that clarity that the existing delegation to the director applies also to the LDO. The wording that was added here was obviously before the LDO or as the LDO was coming into place. And now that it's in practice, it's just ensuring that we have that clarity around the delegation as to who the correct decision maker is. And really, this is going to be in respect of applications to discharge conditions, which if it was a planning application, the scheme of delegation is clear that that's to the director. And so I'd say it's just mirroring that exact wording, and that's why we've also made sure that the wording is quite tight so that members have that confidence as well.
I just wanted clarity on the last sentence there, and that you refer to the council's supplemental planning guidance. I imagine it's supplementary planning guidance, and I was wondering what supplementary planning guidance you're referring to.
It would be any that would be relevant to the particular application. So in this context, for example, in terms of perhaps a Section 106 agreement that came forward, it would need to comply with the terms of the local development order, but also any applicable supplemental planning document as well, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Birch has expressed his disquiet at that, but has anyone else got any comments to make on it at all? Yeah.
Thank you. So just to finish my comments on that, as I say, from my point of view, it is a vital mechanism for opposition parties. And my understanding is Gedling have a requirement in their constitution for 2. Newark and Sherwood have their requirement for 3. Some councils have it for more than that. I believe 4 out of 6 have a requirement for 5 or more. So, but in my mind, it's irrelevant what other councils are doing. We need to do what's right. And again, the Bingham car park motion I did was so vital, because that is really good for democracy and transparency in this forthcoming election, that people know that. And also, just to give another quick example, we had a motion on curbside glass collection, and the ruling group voted against it, which is fine. That's democracy. But we've got a recorded vote on that, and there were ruling group councillors online waxing lyrical about curbside glass collection literally a few days ago, and we were able to challenge them on it and say, well, 2 years ago you voted against it. So this isn't about us per se. This is any opposition group. One day you may be in opposition, and I would hope that you would want these tools available to you. This isn't about scoring political points. This is about being transparent. This is about informing the public. This is about being good for democracy. So that's why I think it's so vital. And my personal view would be, I can understand you don't want one random person just doing it, but I don't think that us or anybody else has gratuitously called recorded votes. For example, in the last meeting on farming, we could have filibustered. We could have called a recorded vote just to waste a bit of time, which may have timed out the final motion. We had that option. We did not do so because we didn't think it was right. and we've never used it in a gratuitous way. I think that would be unfair to say. We've used it where appropriate. So my personal opinion would be to go for, well, initially I was thinking for 2, but I would be open to an amendment that would call for the number of people required for a recorded vote to be in line with the smallest group in the council, whatever that number may be. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that would be fair. In this case, right now, that would mean 1, I believe, because the Liberal Democrats have 1, but they got 13% of the vote. That's fair in my mind? I think that's absolutely honest and fair. I think that's totally fair. Way to go.
Can I just ask the monitoring officer to comment?
Just a few comments really, just to hopefully assist the committee. I just want to be clear about any decisions today. The decision today would be to recommend to approval for full council. So this committee isn't approving any amendments. It is just sending the proposals to hopefully to full council, where all councillors will then have the opportunity to be able to debate and to vote on the matter. The other point that I would make would be in terms of every councillor does have a right to have the way that they voted recorded in the minutes. I appreciate Councillor Birchley that doesn't assist in terms of how other councillors have voted, but any councillor would have the right to be able to request that at any time. In respect of the point about being able to go back to minutes, there is of course only a requirement to keep minutes for 6 years. So having a recorded vote does not mean that the way that the vote is gone and how people have voted is recorded indefinitely. There is only a requirement, as I say, to keep those for 6 years. And in terms of the 5 number that has come up here, so I did do some benchmarking in terms of district and borough councils across Nottinghamshire. So Councillor Birch has referred to 2 of them who have numbers of 2 and 3 councillors to require it. All of the others are 5 or more. Bassett Law District Council requires 7, Mansfield District Council require 10, Broxtowe is 5, and Ashfield District Council actually require half of the councillors present to call a recorded vote to be able to have that. I appreciate here though it's about what's right for Rushcliffe, but it is important that you know that benchmarking information fully and not just some of those.
I think it's fair then, Sarah, that you obviously have looked thoroughly at what other councils are doing, and I absolutely accept it's what's right for Rushcliffe. But actually, again, the monitoring officer makes the point that it's a recommendation, and well, at the end of the day, it's for debate at full council. So, Councillor Pallenti, you wanted to say something as well?
Yeah, I do agree with what Councillor Birch is saying. It may be, I don't know if the 5 is a best practice, but I've been in the council for about 2 years. I am a data analyst as well, so I would say percentage-wise, I don't think a big chunk of the time has been utilized on recorded vote. Therefore, I haven't perceived it to be a problem. And therefore, I do not, I understand you say that's not a decision-making body, and we appreciate that. However, that's a body where we scrutinize and try to understand the rationale behind a particular recommendation. It's a more exploratory space. Hence, we have a more tentative discussion that we probably have, I suppose, at the full council. I do feel uneasy, also you said the 5 is, I do feel uneasy for the reasons mentioned by Councillor Ted Birch, and I wouldn't like to repeat it because it was very eloquently put. I just think it is a public space, the full council, and I think yes, transparency, accountability, and direct link with our residents should be our aim, and recorded votes do strive for that, amplify that. And I don't think, although we like to say that we can transcend party lines and stuff, the reality is that doesn't happen, or very occasionally happen. People are party patriotic, party loyal. So I do have a lot of sympathy with people like Councillor Birch, the Independents, the Lib Dems, where they may, for whatever reason, would like to have a recorded vote and they wouldn't get that support. So I would I would think in that occasion, I think we should stick with what we are doing because it hasn't been inhibited in any way. At least that's my feeling from the 18 months that I'm here.
Okay. Councillor Billings.
Just for clarity, obviously, if this goes forward as 5 or more councillors, because it says 5 or more, why do we need more if we're setting a number? And on the day in full council, how would that actually happen? Do we have to? Does whoever wants to call a recorded vote have to have 5 people already, or on the day they can stand up and say, "I call for a recorded vote. Who's going to back me?"
So exactly that situation that you've outlined there. So somebody would request a recorded vote, and then the chair would ask if they had the numbers to be able to carry that, and that would be by show of hands. Certainly that's how that's worked at a previous authority that I've worked at, where it was a higher number that was required to call the recorded vote, yes.
And on the first part about 5 or more, do we need 4 more?
No, so perhaps the wording might be better to be at least 5. And I say that number in terms of the number that I put forward.
Councillor Wheeler.
Before me, that's how
Oh, sorry, Doug.
That's okay. Okay, fair, that's all.
It's just the idea of the recorded vote and the smaller parties getting together beforehand. There's a point that you made. I would have thought generally people will demand a recorded vote as a result of the discussion that's taking place on the particular item on the day. It's not the sort of thing you necessarily set up in advance. So I feel quite happy with the idea of it being 2 rather than 1.
Gordon, you wanted to say
Well,
something?
at the end of the day, it's not going to go before full council anyway. So they may say 6 and Mrs. 7, whatever, and that'll go for discussion for debate, and consensus will be reached accordingly. I do think slight tweak of the wording is required, and you've already gone to accept us. Sarah made a slight change. Just to pick up slightly what you said earlier on, Councillor Birch, about waxing lyrical about glass recycling and what was said 2 years ago. If I'm out of order, tell me, Andy. I'm perfectly happy with you to do so.
I think so. No. I think you're in. What I don't want to do is get into a great debate about rehashing old debates.
I'm just trying to get some clarity into the background.
Yeah.
2 years ago, this council had to pay for glass recycling, and there'd been a massive cost on us, which is one of the reasons why we were not in favour of glass recycling at that particular time. The government is now committed to paying for glass recycling, which has changed the whole scene, shall we say, or the scene quite differently to wherever you were 2 years or even before. That's my understanding, Councillor Birch. If I'm wrong, I'm sure you'll correct me.
Yes, I will. And yeah, I'll take your comments, and they're fair, but just for a point of information, the actual motion that we brought was on, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was to look into the feasibility of it. So it wasn't committing to it, it was the feasibility. So that was the actual motion. But yeah, the point is not the specifics of the motion. The point is we had that tool available. And yes, I take your point. If it was totally different, then that would actually be misleading because circumstances, the political environment has changed and so on. But the point is the vote was against the feasibility, and very few Conservatives spoke in favour of it at the time. And again, that's just calling it out on that. It's not a party political point. That is just, it's a vital mechanism for local democracy that smaller parties are able to actually shine a light on what's happened in the past and be able to cite that in elections, because we've got the whole system against us in financial and everything else, as I've tried to outline before. It's very difficult doing what we do. And I don't think it's asking for the earth. I think it's asking for reasonable provisions in our constitution to allow us to participate in local democracy, to be transparent and to be pro-democratic. That's all I'm saying.
Councillor Well, Councillor Regan first, actually.
Thank you, Chair. When I read through this earlier, I identified the recorded vote as potentially unfair to smaller parties. So I found myself largely in agreement with your point. It's a democracy, and and fairness of representation should be upheld. What I'm incensed about is the way you've gone about presenting your point today, where you specifically picked out a political party, the ruling group, you've identified a specific committee, and then you've gone on to suggest that they would leverage misinformation in a political campaign. It's your words. You use the word misinformation, and I find that reprehensible. I find that offensive. I find it intimidating that you would bring to a scrutiny group that sort of language, where we are almost apolitical. We work together to scrutinize the policies coming, the policies, the processes before they go to, obviously this one before it goes to full council. And I'm in agreement largely on your point, but surely in a scrutiny committee you can find a better way of delivering your argument without bringing politics into it and without specifically identifying ward members and committees and suggesting we're going to leverage that as misinformation. I'm honestly, I'm shocked by that. I don't think there's a single person in this room I haven't worked with or voted with at some point, and at no point have I ever needed to bring politics into these discussions. So I would like, if there's a mechanism of putting a formal complaint or something, I'd like to understand that and hear that. Thank you.
Can I ask the monitoring officer to respond?
Chair, I think what I would suggest is that we try to deal with the item that's in front of us. The query that Councillor Regan has asked, I would be happy to pick up with him outside of this meeting. I think it's important that we do deal with the business before us and that we try to stick to the items that we are here to consider. We are all going to have different opinions about wording and things of that nature, but I would hope we could come to some consensus in terms of the proposals and the general nature and whether they should go forward to full council for further consideration and debate.
May I have a right to reply?
If your right of reply is just basically going to carry on the argument, then
I would just remind all members we are in a public meeting right now where we are here to debate the item before us. I would ask that matters are taken outside of this committee.
so, well, I think the monitoring officer basically said there's no need to carry on this.
No, but
well, no, I think Councillor Regan is absolutely right. You did bring up a specific example, and to be honest, I would have also said, well, I've been going around to my parish councils telling them that we're going to bring in curbside glass recycling, and the reason we're doing it is because things have changed. So when that vote was taken 2 years ago, there was a very different reasons for not wanting to start curbside recycling. And in fact, I believe the Green Party supported that on the basis that I remember Sue Mallender telling us that she'd managed to get a very nice scar on her cheek falling off her bike and getting cut by glass that had been recycled into roads. And one of the points that was made at the time was that recycling, the way that Rushcliffe were doing it, it meant that glass was recycled, not reused. And that's, so I think that's why we shouldn't really be talking about debates. We're talking about what's going on here. If you're going to say something that's not,
I'm trying to support the meeting. I think in the interest of democracy and open debate, this is fine. And I'm sorry, Councillor Regan feels that way. I believe it was relevant talking about the ruling group for the context of the discussion, and that's all. I've not done it party politically. I'll rewatch it later. I'm happy to be corrected, but I've not done it on party political lines. I'm trying to explain the points, as I said at the outset, from an opposition group leader. So that's all I'm saying. We're trying to talk about recorded votes, and I've tried to explain the reasons why it's important to us to be able to have that facility. And I've given some examples in that context, and that's what I think I've done. And I'm happy to have a civil conversation with Councillor Regan afterwards. I don't really understand where that attack's come from. I'm happy to rewatch this later, and if it comes across as party political, I'm happy to see that. But as I say, I'm trying to explain why we think that the recorded vote should be a number that is more in line with the smaller parties. That's all.
Okay. The only comment I would make, and I'm sure obviously the monitoring officer has confirmed that there are many councils where it's considerably more than 5. Is that, you know, all of those councils will have smaller parties, and you know, we're trying to make sure it's in line, that the constitution is in line. The monitoring officer is obviously suggesting these changes to the constitution based on her experience, and I think actually Councillor Calvert's comment that surely you're calling for a recorded vote on motions at the time. I think if you can't get 5 councillors to agree with your requirement for a recorded vote, then there's a weakness in the debate, shall we say. I don't know. I think personally, I know you're different parties, but you often support each other. Or you know, I'm not saying prearranged. I'm saying that, you know, you'll often agree with some of the points you're making. We've seen that time and again. So, you know, I'm reluctant to put forward a recommendation that reduces it. But if you wish to take a vote on it, I will. No. No.
So there is an amendment.
Well, we either have to, we're putting forward a recommendation to full council, and so if there's a disagreement within the committee, we can have a vote. You know, that's definitely allowed, and you know, my proposal would be that it stays at 5. You've proposed that it's reduced to 2. So I would. Well, you were I think you were.
No, my words were that in line with the smallest group at the council at that time. So at the minute it's 1, but in the future years it could be whatever.
Yeah, and I think no, but at the time you said 2 to start with, and you did actually say, "Can I propose that?" I think you'll find you did, because Councillor Calvert immediately put his hand up and was going to agree with you. So, you know, I saw that as a proposal.
Sorry, just to be clear, I don't want to get hung up on this, but I think I said in line with the smallest party, but
yeah, but you did make a proposal to change it. As part of that proposal. Councillor Wheeler.
I think we've got a form of words, slight tweak, which is agreed by Sarah, agreed some small tweak. We've got that before us. I'd like to recommend we move that, please.
Yeah. And
as for the discussion we had earlier.
Can someone second that? Councillor Wells. We're not in the council chamber where there's you know, we are asking to take a vote. It's not, oh, yours has fallen and that's it. No, because it's ultimately, if you're saying as a committee we're not agreeing on it, therefore we vote on it as a committee, then we can vote on it. So what I'm asking for now is to those who wished it to be forward as it's written here, with the amendment that we've discussed, that it's 5, not 5 or more, who would actually support that. So if I can have a show of hands, please. Sorry. Councillor, sorry.
No, I think it's
fine. If you've got questions.
No, you've got some. I do apologise, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think the word more should be removed.
Yeah, that's what we said.
And I think it should be 4, not 5. But I go with what's on the table.
everything, I mean, the recommendation already, we don't have someone to also go with that.
Yeah, I've already asked for it to be 4, so 5. Sorry. Yeah.
But I put my hand up.
Okay. Yeah. I thought you were I thought you were seconding the call for a vote, actually. So my apologies. Right. So can we take a vote on that then? So all those in favour of it as written with the amendment discussed that it's 5, not 5 or more. Can we have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's 3. Those against? Well, you're against as well. Okay, so that then allows you to make a proposal. Well, if it's 1, then I think that's just pointless, basically.
So I propose 2.
Okay.
Mike, sorry.
I propose 2 is the number that we vote for. And do I have a second, please?
Okay, so those in favour of putting 2 in, and those against. So, you can't. You're against it now.
Well, it's the number, isn't it? Between 5 and 2.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really pleased you're making my life easy tonight. So,
If I may, Chair,
yes.
can I propose that we just go in increments until we get the number we're agreeing in?
Right.
That looks like
Well, I'm going to go down if that's okay. So I'm going to start with 4. Those in favour of 4. Yeah, come on. I'm going to vote for that. But I wasn't voting until I see it, so it's carried. So we'll put in 4. And it will be discussed at full council, and I'm sure you will. And on that, I've lost my place. Yeah, so I've closed the page. That was the problem. And it's gone back to the start. Yeah, I know. Right. So, questions on notice at full council. So the amendment here, subject to the below, at any ordinary meeting, the full council, other than the annual budget meetings and an extraordinary meeting, the councillor may ask the leader, a member of the cabinet, or the chair of any scrutiny committee or member group a question on any matter in relation to which this council has statutory powers or responsibility. The councillor may only submit 1 question per meeting, and if the councillor asking the question is not present at the meeting, the question will not be put. Are there any comments to be made? I think, yeah, we can agree that. Thank you. So, part 4, paragraph 4.35. Every question should be put and answered without discussion. An answer may take the form of a direct oral answer, a reference to publications in which the desired information is published by the council or other published work, a written answer circulated later to the questioner. Where a question which would otherwise have been put cannot be dealt with before the close of a meeting, a written answer shall be provided after the meeting. Is everyone happy with that? Yep. Except for motions which can be moved without notice under the provisions made in this constitution, written notice of every motion signed by the councillor or councillors moving the motion must be delivered to the Chief Executive not later than 5 p.m, 10 clear working days, not including the day of the meeting. Before the meeting, the Chief Executive, in discussion with the Mayor, has the discretion to accept a late motion in exceptional circumstances if delivered to the Chief Executive not later than 5 p.m, 7 clear working days, not including the day of the meeting before the meeting. So the amendment now is no councillor may give notice of more than one motion for each council meeting where motions can be submitted. Everyone happy with that? On scope, motions must be about matters for which the council has a responsibility. Statutory duty, so the amendment being statutory duty or power for a motion to be valid, it must be asking the council to make a decision which is lawful. Again, Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I suspect I'll be in a minority of one here, but I want to speak my mind on my case. So there's been a couple of motions that I brought and were not strictly within the remit of the council. And my argument will be there's value in that. So, for example, we had the PR motion, and that was straight after the meeting, straight after the general election. I think there was great value in that. And it was very interesting. The discussion itself was very interesting. And a Labour councillor came up to me afterwards and he said, what was your angle there? And I said, there wasn't an angle. I just thought it was interesting. It was a good discussion. To my mind, there was no financial impact on the council. I didn't take up any officer time. It was topical. And I think it's good that residents know what their local representatives think about issues like that. I think it's important. And I think it's good for democracy and to forwarding the debate. I think there was an educational value to it as well, and you might argue, well, there's about 20 people online watch these debates. You know, you reach a very few people, which is a legitimate point of view. But I think even purely from the point of view of addressing the full council, addressing all 44 councillors in the room, it was very interesting, and it is an important topic. And discussions like that, I think, are not only intellectually stimulating and important. I think there are lots of people in that room who are decision makers now with political power, and in the future will be decision makers locally and possibly further afield. So there is value in that. The second one we bought was the send motion, where we launched we used it to launch our campaign. Now, we'd have done that anyway without the vehicle of a motion. We'd have launched that campaign. But again, there was a big educational element on that. And lots of councillors came up to me afterwards and didn't realise the severity of the issue and the scandal. I think in future it's going to be one of the biggest scandals this country's ever faced, and there's going to be class action lawsuits and God knows what. It was very, very educational, very important, and it was actually educational for me bringing it, because I was asked by my residents to bring it, and I was actually quite ignorant of some of the specifics, and it was educational for me. And as a councillor, having that facility to do that, I think was valuable. And it would be a shame, I think, if that was taken away. I do take the point that it's no one else has brought it, and it's probably 45 minutes of other councillors' lives and officers' lives they'd want back. But I think it's important. I think it's good for democracy and transparency. But I can see the other side as well. My suggestion would be to maybe limit an annual limit on the number of motions you can bring on things outside of the remit of the council, something on those lines. If I don't have a seconder, then I'll shut up and crack on. But that's my point of view, and I just wanted to express that.
Councillor Bilenta.
So we do have a seconder. I would like just to reiterate some of the points you were making, because I think I can see if we reverse engineer things and we see some practices, we can say that debating things outside the council statutory power, even time wasting, it may be party political scoring, it may surrender to a performative act of a spectacle. And that in certain circumstances it can be true. But as well, the Chambers is our sovereign body, and this is our direct link as well with our residents, with our neighborhoods. And I think it's very important to understand we don't operate and we don't live in a vacuum. It's not only the services that it's our statutory duties to offer that affect us. We are human beings and we are affected by everything that happens in all sorts of contexts that can be under the authority of 4 levels of local government, national government, international bodies, and other bodies. So this is important to understand. We are affected by social, cultural, economic decisions that may not be under our authority. But I think we should have the right, maybe yes, limited, may not have only these motions dominate the agenda, but we should have the right to debate those, because these motions may concern our citizens. I mean, I have a lot of residents that they are asking, for example, about an ethical pension fund, ethical supply chains. And you may say that that's under the authority of the Nottinghamshire County Council, and we don't have decision-making power. However, that affects the well-being of people that are directly linked, that are very upset about certain issues. And I do think that municipalism is not only about service delivery, it's about effecting transformations, as well sending signs of solidarity and support well beyond our remit. And that's as well important, to use the agency to affect things outside the remit of our chambers, like other tiers of local government, or national policy as well, and shout out if we think a national government policies are detrimental. So yes, with that, having said all that, I'm seconding Councillor Bell.
Okay. So can I ask, Sarah, can you make a comment on that? Because I think at the end of the day, in terms of the scope, we still have the fact that it has to go to the chief executive, it has to go to yourself, and it has to be approved. And so, and I'd also point out on the flip side of this, at the last meeting, there was a call to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock. And I think there was a great debate about the fact that there was a disagreement on what the motion that was going forward beyond 10:30 was, and I would have got up, other than it would have been extending the meeting even further and wasting more people's time, and pointed out that I can remember a time when there was an outrage that we stopped the meeting at 10 o'clock because no one was getting a chance to put their motion forward, and it was it works both ways. And actually, I think, we are there to debate the business of the council. And if we can't actually make an impact on it, I just, there has to be, there have to be other, to my mind, there have to be other ways of doing it. And when I walked out of the council chamber at the last meeting, quite a number of people were saying, why are we debating things like this where we can't? And I'm not saying on my side or anyone's side. It was a general comment by several councillors of all parties that, that was, we should only be debating things that are relevant to this council. And I certainly agree with that.
Chair, I would echo what you said there. In terms of this being put forward, it was on the basis of feedback from a number of councillors, but also from members of the public. This amendment is really about deciding as a council how you want to spend that time in the council meetings in terms of motions. It would be more restricted if this was to go through, of course.
Yeah.
It would limit it to matters which are within the control and the responsibility of the council, and that's a decision for you as councillors to make as to how you want to use that time in council meetings, what business you want to discuss.
Councillor Billings.
If I may. If this goes through, I'm going to cite a motion that I proposed for a meeting previously, but I was persuaded not to move it. I would like to bring it back, and that is that this council adopts the United Nations 17th Sustainability Goals. Now, that isn't anything that we have a statutory power over, but it's a framework within which we flag, highlight, scrutinise what we as a council do. Would that kind of motion be rejected because it's not about what we have a statutory duty for, but it's actually something that would enable us to benchmark our actions in line with our climate reduction policy. And it gives a signal to our residents that as a council we are doing the right thing, because we can say, well, on sustainability goal 17 we meet this and this. It's not across the piece every single goal, which I think officers were a bit worried about. It's a way of marking how we're doing, but it's not something that we have a statutory power or duty or power over. So that kind of motion, I'm suspecting, is not going to get through, and I think that's detrimental to what we're trying to do.
So I don't think I can actually answer your question, unfortunately. I would need to give that more consideration, and also as well, I'm not the decision maker for this, it is the chief exec. So I think it would be unfair for me to say something in this meeting that potentially could bind their hands going forward. But by accepting, if full council was to accept this motion, it certainly would limit the motions that could go forward. I would refer though to the fact that it does also talk about where we've got a responsibility. So if it could be linked to a responsibility that we have, and in terms of statutory powers and duties, well, duties is where we have to do something, but powers are where we've got the discretion. So we would want to assist councillors where we can to bring motions which are relevant and fit the parameters of the scope. But I can't answer your question in terms of a specific motion now. No, I don't think that would be fair to do so.
I think what I'd probably add to that as chair is that, of course, as Sarah says, it's the chief executive who's the decision maker, if you like. And, you know, let's just remind everybody that the chief executive is not political. They do have to be impartial, and particularly in light of a couple of letters that came out recently, you know, and I'm glad those questions were asked, actually, because I think it gave the new chief executive the opportunity to underline the fact that he's there for all of us. So I think would be my comment. I think, you know, I did say we'd put things to the vote. Councillor Birch has actually asked us to not vote. Can you just refresh what? Well, we're going to vote whether we put it forward to full council or not. Yeah. So,
can I suggest not to
if you, I think that's within your right. Yeah.
So maybe.
Otherwise, we won't be scrutinising it.
Good point. So limiting it to one motion outside of those parameters per council per year. I don't know. My point is, I think there is value in it. I take the point that you don't want to have meetings bogged down with nonsense, but that would be what I would suggest, to limit it to one motion outside of the council's remit per year, per group. How's that? That seems reasonable.
I wish to spend my time as a councillor in full council meetings debating business of the council and not outside issues, frankly, and that's so I wouldn't support it. So we can vote on it. So I'm going to ask that the vote actually goes to, do we support it as it's written here, if that's okay with everybody? So can I ask for a show of support for as it is written? Yeah. So don't need to use my casting vote. Yeah. So we're nearly there. The chief executive, having due regard to the advice of the monitoring officer, may reject any motion submitted if it is a matter for which the council has no responsibility or statutory duty or power, is defamatory, frivolous or vexatious, unlawful or improper, relates to a planning application or any other quasi-judicial matter. Sarah, yes.
Yes, Chair. I was just going to say, in terms of the first bit of that word, and I think with what's just been accepted, that is to mirror that, which is why the wording is removed. There's then also to reject if it's unlawful or improper. You could argue that would already be there, but it's about making it clearer in our constitution, so that if we do need to reject something, we can because quite often we'll get asked by councillors the part of the constitution that relates to, so it's about making that abundantly clear. And then in terms of planning applications and quasi-judicial matters, that is because those matters are already delegated from full council, so it wouldn't be appropriate for full council to be considering those matters.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Right to speak, so I'll speak. Only comment on that is the word frivolous. I agree with everything else there. I'm just worried that that is ambiguous and vague. Who is deciding if it's frivolous? It's very subjective. And we are then giving the CEO his subjective opinion on it. And I'm just worried about that word. I would remove that word personally and keep the rest. I think that's quite reasonable.
I would just say in response to that, so that's current wording. We haven't rejected anything on that basis so far, and I'm not aware of any of my other authorities where it has been. It is standard wording that is in most. In fact, I can't think of one local authorities that I reviewed why that's not there. So it is there to serve a purpose. I do accept what you're saying in terms of it being subjective, but I would note the decision is with the chief exec. They are apolitical and they do need to take the advice from myself as the monitoring officer as well, with those same obligations and also professional obligations. So that wouldn't be applied lightly. It would only be where it was necessary. So I would be suggesting that that should remain as existing wording, but do take the points that you've made.
And I think the fact that it's actually already in there, and what we're doing is considering the amendments rather than rewriting the constitution at this point. And if it is standard wording for all other constitutions, I think that's a fair comment.
No, I take that, but I stick by my guns. I think it's an unnecessary word, so I think it should be removed. I think it would improve the constitution if that was removed.
Okay, your point is made. But I will basically ask for agreement on the matter from everyone. So is everyone in agreement with that particular amendment? So can I have it in the light of the explanation? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then this is completely new motion, and I think before we have a discussion about this, if you can just outline it a bit, Sarah. Motions not moved. If a motion notice of which is specified in the agenda is not moved, it shall be treated as abandoned and shall not be moved without fresh notice. Can you just comment on how standard of practice that is within other councils?
Yeah, so I suppose first of all, just the rationale around including this. So this would apply where we run out of time in a council meeting, and a motion that's been properly put forward in terms of a notice provided and accepted as being valid, but we don't get to deal with it due to time. Currently, that would roll over to the next council meeting and it would be heard as part of business that's been carried over. As you know, council meetings aren't that regular. So we have a council meeting in March. The next meeting will then be in May, which will be the annual council meeting, and then it will be June, I believe, perhaps July for the next ordinary meeting. So, as an example, if a motion could not be heard at March's meeting, it would have to roll over until June or July, at which point it's likely to be out of date, could have lost the reason why it needed to come forward. So the suggestion is here to prevent that happening, and the administration that we would have to go through to confirm whether they are being carried over is that they would fall away if there isn't time to deal with them. But of course, notice could be put back in again, and then it would go back onto the agenda for the next meeting.
So there's nothing to stop the proposer, if they still feel it's a relevant motion several months later, to actually make sure they put the motion forward again.
That's correct. If it wasn't moved at the meeting and previously debated, what you can't do is put forward a motion again that's already gone forward within the
and at the moment we do carry those motions over, and
that's correct.
There have been times when that debate has been pretty, Councillor Wheeler.
Totally get that. But is it possible, given a motion didn't go through, an awful lot of work can go into it, and I agree it needs to be refreshed, bring it up to date, etc. Is there any possibility of giving that motion some degree of priority, bearing in mind it didn't go through last time, no fault of its own? I'm only asking the question, I don't know whether it's possible or not.
yes. I need to consider how I would word that in terms of ensuring that in the constitution. I guess the difficulty is though with council meetings and the length of time, you may not be able to assess that until much further on. And so I suppose fairness in terms of motions being submitted. But yes, if that's what councillors wanted, then I could go away and think of some wording to capture that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I beg your pardon.
Oh, sorry, it's me off. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's perhaps some wording along the lines of what you could, unless specified in writing, that the assumption would be it carries forward. My worry is the meeting finishes at 10:30. As I understand it, the motions are accepted in order they are received. So somebody could then click a button at 10:31 and then get to the front of the queue, and the person who's missed out for reasons of time is therefore disadvantaged and their motion's not heard first. So I think that would be unfair because, as you say, people put a lot of work in. Generally, I think they are. My feeling would be it would be quite rare that they would be out of date because of the nature of the sorts of things we bring in. And again, this does apply more, I think, to the opposition groups because the ruling group has its members of cabinet, obviously. So I think it would be fairer if there was some language, as Councillor Wheeler said, that gave an advantage to people who'd already put a motion in, lost out through no fault of their own, but could then still retain their place in the queue, if you like. I think that would be the best system if we could word it however that's worded. I think that would be fairer.
So I'd say you're not making anyone's life easy tonight, are we? No, not directly.
I suppose the only comment I would make, Chair, is that if that was the feeling of the room, it may just be easier to remove that, in all honesty.
And perhaps
rather than making complicated
I was
language
wondering
with
actually if
different
that's the feeling, then actually do we just take this out?
and the other, which then makes it difficult to read.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, this was the one of all of them that I was most unhappy about. So,
so you're happy? If we
so I'm
remove
happy
it?
about getting rid of it.
So, okay, no, yeah. So basically, we are basically saying that we don't need that amendment. Is that? Yeah. Okay. Obviously, the next one is we've already debated about a recorded vote, so that should read 4 or more. Yeah.
Was it 4 or more? 4.
4, sorry, 4. Thank you. Thank you. No, you're quite right. That should read 4, not 4 or more. So, are all happy with that? Your brain is ticking over, Councillor Calvert.
Because thinking that the or more is quite sensible, because if what happens if 5 or 6 people put their hands up and support it?
Well, there's 4.
But no, it's 4 or more.
But it's a minimum of 4.
Minimum. Okay.
So
I think the wording we agreed on was at least 4.
At least 4. Yeah, at least 4. Yeah. Okay. And then I think the final one is just obviously it's a protocol thing, standing to speak at full councils, and what we're amending is we're able to. So in other words, if someone is not able to stand up, and I can think of several instances where someone was sat there with a boot on their foot. Councillor Reid.
I think it'd be fair if someone has a disability. I think it's unfair to make them put the request in every single time. So if they make the request once, it should stand for.
Yeah. I think if someone is absolutely can't stand because they're in a wheelchair or whatever, then yes, absolutely. I think this is more if covering an eventuality. So if someone's had an operation and got a boot on their foot or something like that.
Oh, I see.
Because I've been in a position in council where I was in, and in fact I can remember a councillor when I first came was sort of had about 6 months with a cast on their foot and clearly couldn't stand up.
But I don't think someone should be disallowed to speak.
No.
If they haven't informed the mayor prior to the meeting.
Prior to the meeting, yeah.
So just
it should be
clarification.
Yeah. So yeah, does that work like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So does that actually, so what, do we need to amend the final sentence? Sorry, Councillor Billing.
I was going to suggest an amendment to, rather than saying, where a councillor is unable to stand to speak at the meeting, they should notify the mayor in advance of the meeting. Noted, just that the council needs to give notice, because that could be on the day, because it may be something that happened that day as it's coming to council.
That doesn't distinguish, or do we want to distinguish? Because I think part of it is distinguishing between someone who's temporarily unable to stand and making it clear that they can't, and versus someone.
Do we just take that sentence out?
Ask the monitoring officer for.
So the rationale behind why this was proposed, if everybody else is standing in the council chamber to give their speech and somebody is sitting down, I suppose potentially to an outsider, to a member of the public watching that, they might wonder why, they could be disadvantaged or be considered that they're not as passionate or not as interested, for example. So, and it's also to make sure that actually the protocol is followed when it should be. We do have a protocol at this council that we stand when we're speaking on a matter, and it's to make sure that actually people are only not doing that when there is, for example, a medical reason, a genuine reason why they couldn't do so, which is why why I've suggested that there is that notification to the mayor in advance. In terms of it in advance of the meeting, I would consider that being on the day just before the meeting starts. There isn't a time period there. It doesn't need to be in writing or anything like that. So I have worded it to give that flexibility.
And what about Councillor Reagan's point about if we did have someone who wasn't ever able to stand for whatever reason?
I can incorporate some appropriate word in that if the committee are happy for me to do so.
Okay. Right, that's it. We've debated the Constitution, we've made some amendments, we've taken some out. So thank you very much for the debate and the contributions. That's what we're here to do. And, you know, I think it's important that we do that. So the final thing is the order of...
Thank you.
What we're doing next?
I've got now 3 minutes.
The work programme, that's what the word I was looking for.
So the work programme currently is May or June, date to be confirmed, and September. I've got 2 amendments to propose to those dates. So in the May or June, whichever one it goes to, we would need to take the external audit plan in that particular meeting, which does make it a rather heavy agenda. So it might be that we want to consider starting a little bit earlier on that day. And in the September meeting, we would be hoping to bring the statement of accounts also, so that would also need to be added to that agenda. Other than that, any questions?
I'm going to ask one. And I know it's because we haven't actually approved the meeting dates yet, but are there meeting dates tentatively in at the moment? Because I'm saying this because last year I found that a meeting date was published and I've already booked a holiday. And it was very ably chaired by Councillor Polenta.
I believe some dates have been proposed, but I'm not sure at what meeting. I don't know if Sarah knows what meeting they're going to be approved at.
Is there any way that proposed dates can be published in advance for councillors to populate their diaries in advance?
I think that would be fine. The timetable at the moment is just still in draft form, being circulated amongst officers to confirm that we've captured all of the meetings that we need to. Right. They would go to the annual meeting in May for formal approval, but once we have them in a draft form, I see no reason why they couldn't be shared. But councillors acknowledging that they are in draft and could be subject to change following that annual council
I certainly
meeting.
got caught out last year because I thought, I looked in my diary and saw no meetings, and if they were in there in shadow, I might have arranged a different week to go away. Okay, everybody happy with those proposed changes? So that brings the meeting to a close. I'm pleased to say that last time we debated the Constitution, we were still here 45 minutes late.